The unexpected war. Samantha sat in the living room, the soft hum of the clock ticking in the background. She glanced at the old leather-bound journal that had been sitting untouched on the shelf for years. It belonged to her late husband, Peter. He had passed away suddenly, leaving her with a lifetime of memories and questions. The journal had always been there, a reminder of the man she loved and the life they had shared. But for some reason, she had never been able to bring herself to read it. It had been tucked away in the corner of the shelf, hidden among the other books that filled the room. The leather cover was worn, and the pages inside had started to yellow with age. It was as though Peter had left it there for her to find, yet she could never quite bring herself to open it. The pain of losing him still lingered, and reading his words felt too much like letting go. But today, something was different. A strange feeling tugged at her, pulling her toward the journal. She didn't know why, but she felt as though it was time. As she picked it up, the weight of it seemed heavier than she remembered. She brushed her fingers over the worn cover and hesitated for a moment before opening the first page. The pages inside were filled with Peter's neat handwriting, every word written with care. Samantha's heart skipped a beat as she read the first line. "I never wanted her to find this, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page. What was this? What was Peter writing about? He had never shared his feelings like this with her before. She had always known him as a kind and loving man, someone who never kept secrets, someone who was always honest. But now, with the journal in her hands, she felt as though she was about to discover something that would shatter everything she thought she knew about him. As she read on, the words painted a different picture, a picture of Peter that Samantha hadn't seen. It wasn't the man she had married, the man who had been her partner in life, her confidant, and her best friend. No, the words on the pages described someone else entirely. Peter's journal detailed a secret war he had fought, one that Samantha had never known about. It wasn't a war of soldiers or battlefields, but a quiet, hidden war that had been raging beneath the surface of their lives. For years, Peter had been involved in something dark and dangerous, something that had torn him apart inside. And now, it seemed, he was confessing it all, finally revealing the truth to Samantha, even though she hadn't asked for it. "I couldn't tell her," Peter had written. "Not then. She would never understand. She would never forgive me." Samantha felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What had Peter done? What had he been hiding from her all these years? The words on the page seemed to unravel the very foundation of their marriage. She had always believed that they had shared everything, that their love had been built on trust and honesty. But now, as she read Peter's words, she realized that there had been things he had kept buried deep within him, things he had never shared, not even with her. The journal revealed that Peter had been involved in a secret organization, an organization that fought against a hidden enemy, one that no one outside of the group knew about. He had been working with them for years, gathering information and putting himself at risk to protect her and their family from something that she could never have imagined. But the more Samantha read, the more she realized that Peter's involvement had come at a great cost. Peter had been struggling with his conscience, torn between his duty to this organization and his love for her. He had kept the truth from her to protect her, to keep her safe from the dangerous world he had entered. But now, with his death, all of that was spilling out. All the secrets he had kept hidden from her were coming to light. Samantha felt a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could he have kept something so important from her? Why hadn't he told her? She had always trusted him, always believed that their life together had been free of secrets. But now she felt as though she had been living in the dark, unaware of the true nature of her husband's life. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes as she read on. Peter's words grew more desperate as he confessed the toll this hidden life had taken on him. He had lived in constant fear, knowing that the organization he worked for was dangerous, that the enemies they fought against were ruthless. He had wanted to tell her, but he had been too afraid of the consequences. The war he had fought had been one of secrecy and lies, and it seemed to have consumed him in ways that Samantha couldn't fully comprehend. "I hope one day she can forgive me," Peter had written in his final entry. "I hope she can understand why I did it, even if it means losing her." Samantha's heart shattered as she read those final words. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever understand the choices he had made, the secret life he had kept hidden from her for so long? The journal slipped from her hands as she sat there in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. Peter had fought a battle she had never known about, a battle that had cost him everything. And now she was left to pick up the pieces, to try and make sense of the man she had loved, and the secrets he had kept from her until the very end. Samantha sat in the quiet of the room, the journal open in her lap, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't seem to grasp. The truth was out, but the answers she was looking for were still out of reach. The war Peter had fought was far from over, and Samantha knew that this was only the beginning of the journey to uncover the full extent of the secret her husband had kept hidden. The hidden truth. Samantha couldn't shake the weight of Peter's journal from her mind. Every time she tried to focus on something else, her thoughts would return to the words she had read, the secrets, the lies, and the hidden life her husband had led. She had never imagined that Peter, the man she had spent so many years with, could have been keeping such an important part of himself from her. The journal lay open on the table before her, its pages marked by Peter's neat handwriting. But now it felt like a puzzle, each word, each sentence, a clue to a life she didn't know existed, a life that had been kept from her, hidden in the shadows. Peter had kept her in the dark, and now she was left to piece together the fragments of his past. Samantha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to keep reading. She needed to understand. There were too many questions, too many unanswered pieces of the puzzle. Her fingers trembled as she turned to the next page of the journal. It was there, in the next entry, that Peter began to explain more about the secret organization he had been involved with. The words were difficult to read at first. They described a network of individuals working undercover, fighting against enemies whose names were never spoken aloud. They were a group bound by loyalty, secrecy, and the belief that their cause was just. But the more Peter wrote, the clearer it became that his involvement wasn't just about duty, it was personal. Peter had joined this group long before Samantha had even met him. It was a decision he had made in his youth, after a traumatic event that had changed the course of his life. As a young man, he had witnessed something that no one should have to see, a moment that had haunted him for years. That moment, Peter confessed, was the reason he had joined the organization in the first place. It was why he had fought, why he had kept secrets, and why he had chosen to live a life full of hidden dangers. Samantha read on, trying to understand the depth of Peter's pain. He had lost his family in an attack, a brutal act of violence that had destroyed everything he had known. His mother and father had been taken from him in an instant, leaving him alone in the world. That tragedy had shaped Peter into the man he became. It had driven him to make a vow, to protect those he loved, no matter the cost. He had joined the organization because it gave him a purpose, a way to fight back against the forces that had destroyed his life. But he had never told Samantha about it. He had never shared the truth about why he had been so distant at times, why he had been so guarded about his past. Peter's words grew darker as he described the events that had followed. The organization he was part of was shrouded in secrecy, its operations hidden from the world. And as Peter became more involved, he found himself tangled in a web of deceit and violence that he couldn't escape. The deeper he got, the more it cost him. At times, Peter had felt like a prisoner of his own choices, trapped between his love for Samantha and the demands of the organization. There were moments when he had wanted to tell her everything, when he had wanted to come clean and share the burden he had been carrying. But fear had stopped him. Fear of losing her, fear of bringing her into a dangerous world she didn't deserve. Samantha's heart ached as she read these words. How could Peter have lived like this? How could he have kept such a huge part of himself hidden for so long? She had always thought that they shared everything, that their life together had been built on trust. But now, she realized how little she had truly known about Peter's past. And then there it was, the sentence that stopped her cold. I thought I could protect her from the truth. But the truth is, I may have put her in danger. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. What did he mean? How had he put her in danger? The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. All these years, Peter had been shielding her from something far greater than she had ever known. And now, with his death, it seemed that the danger was still out there, waiting for her. Samantha pushed the journal away from her and stood up. Her head was spinning. She had known that Peter had been hiding something, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. The secret life he had kept from her, the hidden war he had fought. She wasn't just a bystander in his past. She was a part of it. But how? How was she involved in all of this? Samantha didn't know, but she was certain of one thing. Peter's secret was not over. It wasn't finished with his death. The enemies he had fought against, the organization he had been part of, she had no idea how deep it went or what it meant for her now. Her mind raced with questions. Who were these enemies Peter had mentioned? And why had he never told her the full story? What did it mean for her safety now that she knew the truth? Samantha felt a chill run through her. She wasn't safe. Not anymore. With shaky hands, she grabbed the journal again. There had to be more. She couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and she needed to find it. If Peter had kept this secret to protect her, then she needed to finish what he had started. She needed to uncover the full extent of his hidden life, and the dangers that still lurked in the shadows. As she flipped through the pages, one question echoed in her mind. What was Peter really protecting her from? The unraveling secrets. Samantha couldn't believe what she had just read. The words on the pages of Peter's journal were like a maze, leading her down paths she never expected to find. Each new entry seemed to reveal more about his hidden life, a life she had never known existed. Her mind was racing, but there was no escaping the reality of what she was reading. Peter's involvement with the secret organization had been deeper than she could have ever imagined. He had not only been a part of it, but he had also played a key role in some of their most dangerous operations. The more Samantha read, the clearer it became. Peter had been living a double life all along. The man she had married, the man she had loved, had been hiding a world of danger and deception from her. Samantha paused, her hands trembling as she turned the page. The next entry was dated only a few months before Peter's sudden death. It was clear from his words that he had been growing increasingly worried. The danger he had been fighting against for so long was closing in, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it would reach her. Peter's handwriting had become more frantic in the final entries. He spoke of mysterious figures watching him, of threats that seemed to be coming from all directions. He had always been protective of her, but now, it seemed, his need to protect her had grown even stronger. He had tried to shield her from the truth, but now he feared that his silence had made her vulnerable. The last few pages were filled with his concerns about her safety, and the realization hit Samantha hard. Peter's fear was not without reason. Whatever he had been involved in, whatever secrets he had kept hidden, they weren't finished with her. Samantha felt a wave of panic rise within her. She had always thought of her life as normal, predictable. She had never imagined that her husband, the man who had been her partner in everything, had been living a life so full of hidden dangers. She had never imagined that the quiet, loving man she knew had been a part of something so dark. She closed the journal and stared at it, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind was filled with questions and no answers. She thought of Peter, of their life together, and wondered if any of it had been real. Had he ever truly been honest with her, or had everything she knew about him been a lie? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing on the table. Samantha glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be someone from Peter's past? Someone who knew about the secrets he had kept hidden? She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the phone. She had no idea what to expect. What if it was someone who was connected to the organization Peter had been a part of? With a deep breath, she answered the call. "Hello," she said, her voice shaky. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, followed by a low voice. "Samantha." She froze. The voice was unfamiliar, but it had a certain coldness to it that made her shiver. "Yes," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's about Peter," the voice said. "You need to listen carefully. Your life is in danger. There are things you don't know, things he tried to protect you from. But it's not over. Not yet." The words sent a chill down Samantha's spine. Her breath caught in her throat. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't tell you everything right now," the voice said, "but you need to trust me. Peter wasn't just trying to keep you safe from his past. There are people looking for you, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Samantha's mind was spinning. What was going on? Why was someone calling her about Peter's past? How did they know about her? And what did they mean by they? Before she could say anything else, the voice added, "You need to find out the truth. Your husband wasn't the man you thought he was. The secrets he kept from you, they go deeper than you can imagine." The line went dead. Samantha stared at the phone in shock, her heart racing. Who was that? What did they want? And what did they mean by Peter's secrets going deeper? The fear she had been pushing down began to rise again. The world she had known was slipping away, replaced by a terrifying unknown. There were people out there, people connected to Peter's past, and they knew more about her than she could have imagined. Her thoughts returned to the journal. There had to be more in it, more answers. But as she picked it up again, she couldn't shake the feeling that every answer would lead to even more questions. Peter had left her a path to follow, but now, that path felt like a dangerous game. The closer she got to the truth, the more she realized how much she didn't know, and how much she might wish she never did. Samantha opened the journal again, determined to find out what Peter had been protecting her from. The truth, it seemed, was just the beginning of a much darker journey. And no matter how terrifying it might be, she had to keep going. For Peter, for herself, for whatever was lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to uncover it. The hidden danger. Samantha sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the journal still resting on her lap. Her fingers traced over the pages, but the words no longer made sense. She had read through them so many times, yet each time the meaning seemed to shift, becoming more sinister and unsettling. The phone call, the warning from the mysterious voice, none of it made sense, but one thing was clear. Peter had known something dangerous was coming, something that would threaten both their lives. She couldn't shake the feeling that every step she took was drawing her deeper into a world she was never meant to enter. Peter had always been protective of her, but now she was beginning to understand just how much he had tried to shield her from. The secret organization, the coded messages, the hidden files. It was all connected, but how? And why had he kept all of this from her? Her mind raced, but then her eyes landed on one particular entry in the journal. It was a name, scrawled across the page in Peter's familiar handwriting. The Red Circle. Samantha had never heard of it before. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the words over and over. The Red Circle. What was it? A person? A group? The name seemed to resonate in her mind, as though it were something she was supposed to recognize. But the more she thought about it, the less she understood. The journal offered no more explanations, only cryptic warnings and vague references to danger. It was as though Peter had been trying to protect her without ever telling her the full truth. And now, the past was closing in, just as the mysterious voice had said. Samantha's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock at the door. Her heart leaped into her throat. Who could it be? It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend she wasn't home. But something inside her told her that this wasn't just a simple visitor. This was part of the story she had been unraveling, a piece of the puzzle she had to confront. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling heavy with each step. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Taking a deep breath, Samantha opened the door. Standing on the doorstep was a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark eyes and a serious expression. He looked out of place, like someone who didn't belong in this quiet neighborhood. "Can I help you?" Samantha asked, her voice steady despite the unease building in her chest. The man studied her for a moment before speaking. "Are you Samantha Green?" "Yes, I am. Who are you?" "My name is Mark," the man said, his voice low and measured. "I'm here about your husband." Samantha's heart stopped. She instinctively took a step back, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "What do you know about Peter?" Mark hesitated, his eyes scanning the street behind him. It was as if he was making sure no one was watching. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "We need to talk. It's about the red circle." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. The red circle, the name she had just read in Peter's journal. Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Why was this man here? How did he know about the journal? And what did the red circle have to do with her husband? "I don't know who you are, but I don't have time for games," Samantha said, her voice shaky but firm. "I don't know what Peter was involved in, but I don't want any part of it." Mark's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained intense. "You don't have a choice," he said. "The red circle is coming for you. They've been watching you, waiting for you to uncover the truth, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. The warning from the mysterious voice on the phone echoed in her mind. "There are people looking for you, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Her thoughts were a blur. She had to know more, but she couldn't do this alone. She didn't trust Mark, but she also couldn't ignore the danger that seemed to be closing in. She stepped back, allowing him to enter. She had no choice. The danger was real. The red circle was real. As Mark entered the house, he glanced around quickly, as if making sure no one was following him. He closed the door behind him and turned to Samantha, his face serious. "We don't have much time," he said. "The red circle doesn't take kindly to people asking questions. They've already made it clear they don't want you involved. But it's too late. You've uncovered too much." Samantha felt a knot form in her stomach. What do they want with me? Mark didn't answer right away. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain back, peering out into the darkness. After a long pause, he turned back to her. "They want the journal. Your husband left clues, and they want to make sure those clues never see the light of day." Samantha's heart raced. The journal. Peter's final message to her. She had to protect it, no matter what. But the question still burned in her mind. Why had Peter left her this journal? "We need to find out what Peter was trying to tell you," Mark continued, his voice urgent. "Before it's too late." Samantha didn't know if she could trust him, but she had no choice. She had already taken the first steps into this unknown world, and now there was no turning back. She had to uncover the truth. For Peter, for herself, the secret connection. Samantha sat at the kitchen table, the journal open in front of her. The words on the pages seemed to blur together as she tried to process everything Mark had told her. She had always thought of Peter as a simple man, quiet, reserved, and perhaps a little too secretive at times. But this was beyond her understanding. A secret group, hidden messages, coded entries in a journal, and now a warning about the red circle. It was too much. Mark had insisted they needed to stay low, that the red circle was far more dangerous than anything she could imagine. And as he talked, something inside Samantha clicked. This wasn't just about Peter's secret life. It was about her now. The moment she discovered that journal, everything had changed. The red circle was watching her, waiting for her to uncover the truth, and from what Mark had said, they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. She glanced up at Mark, who was pacing in the living room. His words echoed in her mind. They'll stop at nothing to silence anyone who knows about them. "Mark," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "What is the red circle, and why does Peter know so much about them?" Mark paused, his back to her as he stared out the window, deep in thought. After a long moment, he turned to face her. "I don't expect you to understand, but you have to know the truth. The Red Circle is a covert group with deep roots in politics, business, and even the military. They pull strings from the shadows, controlling things from behind the scenes. Peter got too close to them. He was trying to expose them, and that's why they came after him." Samantha felt her pulse quicken. Exposed them? Peter. Her Peter. This was too much to take in. The man she had married, the man who had seemed so ordinary, had been involved in something this dangerous. "And you, how do you know all this?" Samantha asked, her voice shaky. She was starting to feel like she was in over her head. Mark took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Because I used to be one of them. I was part of the Red Circle. I left years ago when I realized how dangerous they were, but I knew Peter. He and I worked together on something important. We had a plan to bring them down." Samantha's mind raced. She had never imagined that the quiet, reserved man Peter had been married to could have had such a dark past. Mark's confession sent shockwaves through her, but before she could speak, he raised a hand, signaling for her to listen. "I know this is hard to hear, but you need to understand something. Peter didn't just leave this journal for you by accident. He knew the Red Circle would come after him, and he wanted to make sure you were prepared. This journal, it's more than just a record of his thoughts. It's a map. Each entry is a clue to something bigger, something that could bring the Red Circle to its knees." Samantha's head was spinning. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages of the journal again. She could barely comprehend the enormity of what she was hearing. Peter had been involved in something huge, something that could shake the very foundations of the world as she knew it. But why hadn't he ever told her? "Mark," she said slowly, "why didn't Peter tell me any of this? Why keep it a secret from me?" Mark's expression softened as he walked toward her. "Peter was trying to protect you, Samantha. He didn't want you to be caught up in this. The Red Circle, they are ruthless, and once they know you're involved, there's no going back. Peter wanted you to live a quiet, peaceful life. He didn't want you dragged into a war you didn't sign up for. But now I am involved," Samantha whispered, staring at the journal in front of her. "Now they're coming for me, aren't they?" Mark nodded solemnly. "Yes, they are. And they won't stop until they get what they want. That's why we need to find out what Peter left for you. There's a reason he chose you to carry on his work. You're the key to stopping them." Samantha's mind was reeling with questions. She was the key. She had never imagined that the simple life she'd shared with Peter would lead to something like this. But now, with the journal in her hands, she knew she had no choice but to keep going. For Peter, for herself, she couldn't let the Red Circle win. She couldn't let Peter's death be in vain. But the road ahead was dangerous. The Red Circle would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And now, they were targeting her. She had to be smart. She had to be careful. "Okay," Samantha said, her voice steady now. "What do we do next?" Mark's eyes glinted with a mix of determination and caution. "We go through the journal, piece by piece. There's a reason Peter hid these clues. We just need to figure out what he was trying to tell us." As she turned the next page in the journal, Samantha knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. The Red Circle was real, and they were coming for her. But as long as she had the journal and the will to fight, she would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. And with that, the dangerous game of cat and mouse had begun. The hidden clue. Samantha sat alone in the dimly lit study, the only sound the quiet hum of the clock on the wall. The journal lay open in front of her, its pages yellowed with age, yet the words seemed as fresh and urgent as if Peter had written them just days ago. She had read through it multiple times, each entry revealing something new, but there was one part that kept nagging at her, a cryptic phrase hidden in the middle of a passage. The key is hidden where shadows never fall. Samantha ran her fingers over the words, her brow furrowed in thought. What could Peter have meant? Where shadows never fall. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning the shelves filled with books and the small desk that Peter had once used for his work. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then something caught her eye. Something she hadn't noticed before. In the corner of the room, behind a large leather-bound book, there was a small, unmarked box. It was tucked away so carefully that it had been nearly invisible, blending into the shadows of the room. Samantha stood up, her heart racing. Could this be the hidden clue Peter had left for her? She walked over to the box and carefully pulled it from its resting place. It was old with a brass lock, and it seemed to have been untouched for years. She reached for the journal again, hoping there would be a hint, a direction, something to tell her what to do next. Her fingers flicked through the pages until she found it. The next part of the entry. The lock will open when the light reveals what's hidden inside. The phrase seemed to be of direct reference to the box in her hands. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if Peter had known she would be in this exact spot, at this exact time, facing this exact puzzle. Samantha placed the journal down and turned her attention back to the box. She looked around the room for a source of light. Nothing but the dim glow of a desk lamp. But then, the sunlight from the window shifted as the sun began to set, casting long, golden beams of light into the room. Samantha moved the box into the light, and to her amazement, the lock began to shimmer. It was almost as if the light itself was unlocking the box. Her fingers shook as she gently turned the small brass key in the lock, hearing it click open. She slowly lifted the lid, not knowing what to expect, but hoping that whatever was inside would lead her to the answers she desperately needed. Inside the box was a bundle of old photographs and a small, intricately carved wooden key. The photos were black and white, some of them worn and faded, showing people Samantha didn't recognize. There was one of Peter, much younger, standing next to a man in a suit, his face serious and grim. There was another of a woman, also unknown, holding a baby in her arms. The woman's eyes were familiar, like a reflection of something Samantha had seen before, but she couldn't place it. Her hands trembling, Samantha picked up the wooden key. It was small, no bigger than her palm, with delicate engravings on its surface. There was something about it that seemed important. But what did it open? And why had Peter kept it hidden? As she sifted through the photos, one image caught her eye. A picture of a large, imposing building. It looked like an old mansion, surrounded by trees, with an air of mystery about it. The back of the photo was marked with a single word: home. Samantha's mind raced. Could this be where Peter had gone to find the answers? The mansion in the photo looked like a place from another time. A place that held secrets, secrets that were somehow connected to Peter's past, to the red circle, and now to her. She closed the box carefully, her thoughts racing. She couldn't ignore the connection any longer. She had to find that mansion. She had to understand the significance of the key and the woman in the photo. Peter had left her a trail to follow, and she was determined to uncover the truth. But just as she stood up, ready to make her next move, the door to the study creaked open. Samantha froze, the key and photos still in her hands. She wasn't expecting anyone. Who could it be? Had someone found out what she was doing? Mark entered the room, his face pale. His eyes locked onto the box on the table, and for a split second, his expression darkened. Samantha knew then that something had shifted. The stakes had just been raised. She couldn't trust anyone, not even Mark. "Samantha," Mark said quietly, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to leave. Now." Samantha stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why? What's happened?" "It's the red circle," Mark said, his eyes flicking nervously to the window. "They're here." The quiet hum of the clock seemed to disappear, replaced by the heavy thud of Samantha's heart. The danger was closer than she had imagined. The red circle had found her. She knew what she had to do. The journal, the box, and the key were her only leads. She wasn't going to let Peter's death be in vain. But with the red circle closing in, time was running out. Samantha stood tall, clutching the key in her hand. She had a mission now, a dangerous one, and she was going to see it through, no matter the cost. The final reveal. Samantha's pulse raced as she grabbed the small wooden key and the photos, stuffing them into her bag. Mark stood by the door, his expression tense as he scanned the room for any sign of movement. The weight of the moment pressed down on Samantha's shoulders. There was no turning back now. She had to find the mansion. She had to solve the mystery of Peter's past. Mark spoke again, his voice quieter this time, almost apologetic. "Samantha, you need to understand. The red circle, they've been watching us. They're dangerous. If they know what you have." His voice trailed off, and he didn't need to finish the thought. She already knew the risks. Samantha looked at him, her heart torn. She trusted Mark, but there were too many questions. Why hadn't he told her the truth sooner? Why had he kept so many secrets? But now wasn't the time for doubts. If the red circle was after them, they couldn't waste another second. "Where is the mansion?" Samantha asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Tell me, Mark." Mark hesitated. He looked like he was about to say something when a sudden knock on the door startled them both. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. It was too early for anyone to be checking in. She didn't even think it was safe to answer. The red circle could have someone on the other side, waiting to corner her. "We have to go," Samantha said, pulling Mark by the arm. They needed to escape. Now. Mark opened the door cautiously, revealing nothing but a darkened hallway. No one was there, but the feeling of being watched hadn't left her. There was a sense of urgency in the air. "I'll drive," Mark said quickly, his eyes darting around. "We'll take the back exit." Samantha nodded, her mind racing. She had no idea where the mansion was, but the photo of the house still burned in her memory. The key felt heavy in her pocket as they hurried to the car, each step echoing in the silence of the night. The drive was tense. Every car that passed by felt like a potential threat. Every turn they made seemed to pull them deeper into unknown territory. Mark didn't speak much during the drive. His grip on the wheel was tight, his knuckles white. Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling her. After what felt like an eternity, Mark turned onto a quiet, winding road, the headlights of the car barely cutting through the thick fog that had settled over the area. They passed fields and empty houses, the landscape stretching out in all directions, shrouded in mystery. "Where are we going?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling now with uncertainty. "Just trust me," Mark replied, not looking at her. He seemed distant, like he was lost in his own thoughts. The road narrowed, and Samantha could see a large iron gate appear ahead. The gate was old, its rusted bars twisting in odd shapes, as if time itself had forgotten this place. The car stopped in front of it, and Samantha could see the mansion in the distance, barely visible through the fog. It was large, far larger than she had expected. Its looming silhouette seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, 1,000 unanswered questions. Mark turned off the engine, and the car was bathed in an eerie silence. The air felt thick with tension, and Samantha could sense that something was about to change. This was the place, the mansion in the photo. And this was where everything would come together. Mark didn't say anything as he opened the door. He stepped out of the car, but he didn't wait for Samantha. She followed him, her heart pounding. The mansion loomed in front of her now, and she could feel the weight of the secrets it held pressing down on her. She looked down at the wooden key, now feeling the true weight of its purpose. They approached the door, and Mark reached for the large brass handle. But before he could touch it, the door creaked open on its own. A gust of cold wind rushed out, and Samantha shivered. She glanced at Mark, who looked just as surprised as she felt. "Go inside," Mark urged, his voice low. "There's no turning back now." Samantha stepped over the threshold, her breath catching as the door slammed shut behind them. The interior of the mansion was dim, lit only by the faint glow of candlelight. Dust covered everything: old furniture, cobwebs in the corners, and the smell of time forgotten. The house felt alive with its own secrets, and Samantha could almost hear the whispers of the past in the shadows. Mark led the way, moving through the hallway like he knew where he was going. They passed several rooms, some locked, others with doors slightly ajar. Samantha's senses were on high alert. The mansion felt both welcoming and unsettling. She couldn't help but wonder what Peter had been doing here. What was so important that he had kept it hidden for so long? They arrived at a small room at the end of the hallway. It was smaller than the others, almost hidden from view. Mark opened the door, and Samantha's eyes immediately fell on a large wooden desk in the center of the room. On the desk lay a small weathered box. It looked familiar, just like the one she had seen in the photo, and it was almost as if it had been waiting for her all along. Mark stepped aside, his expression unreadable. This is it. This is where the truth begins. Samantha's hands trembled as she approached the desk. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing: everything had led to this moment. She picked up the box and unlocked it with the wooden key, her heart pounding in her chest. As the lid creaked open, she couldn't believe what she saw inside. It wasn't just a journal, it was a letter from Peter that would reveal everything. But just as Samantha began to read, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. The red circle had found her.